Welcome, everyone, to Hello, Ernest at the Kitchen Table, connecting writers and readers. I am Jan Pratt, the author of several children's picture books and also the author of a series of yoga lesson plans for kids.
And I am Gaga Gabarty. I'm a co-author with Judy Lee Butler. Together, we write the Phoebe Cornell Mystery Series. Join us for every episode as we connect readers to your next great read. Today we have with us Sarah Reichert, and Sarah is an author and want to welcome her delighted that she was able to take some time out of a busy summer schedule with family and friends, but welcome her today. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jean, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we are happy that you volunteered to come on in and visit with us. The intent of this podcast is always to see if we can create more information for your readers all about you, and see if we can maybe somehow link into your books as all of us read more and more as we go into the future, I hope. And
Yes.
I do see your dog walking around behind you. So
Yeah, she's gonna lay down now. She got a bigger bigger bed just right.
oh yes,
Yeah.
I remember that. Okay,
That's River.
great. Cute, very cute. All right, well, let's start with kind of the basics. I think our listeners, our watchers are interested in what inspired you or what triggered you to go into writing.
Well, I was a really avid reader as a young girl. I grew up in a very small town and about a block away from our local library, so there wasn't a lot to do. We didn't have a lot of television. We didn't have a lot of entertainment. So the library was pretty much where I lived, and I just fell in love with story. And probably about middle school, high school, that transitionary era, I really wanted to tell my own stories, and I really started, hearing characters in my head and thinking about situations in my head that were interesting, and I wanted to put them on paper. So that's been
Nice.
a while.
So, okay, all right. Well, was there something along the way that you made a choice to start writing what was in your head?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always kind of dabbled, I just write like scenes
Okay.
down or stories. And it wasn't until after my first daughter was born and I'd decided to stay home with her. We were able to do that, luckily. And I thought, I've been wanting to write a whole book, a real book. I'd written some kind of horrible starter novels in college, um, as I think most writers have. Luckily, they're on floppy disk. I can't get them. Nobody will ever see them. But I had a little time, not a lot. And so I would just write. I started writing that novel during nap times and when she was in preschool, and just committing to the idea that I wanted to finish this. And
Mhm.
and it really sprung from, I had a good friend pass away unexpectedly, and it makes you think when you're that young. I think I was in my 30s. 30s is young.
Yes,
um,
okay.
that life is kind of unexpected, and if you want to do something, you really should just go and do it while you have the time, because you never know.
Mhm. And is there anything from that perspective that you carry into your writing, the loss of this friend?
Yeah, I do. Even just like on the micro level of finding him in characters and writing little things that I remember about him as a character trait somewhere. I That happens, but also just embracing that idea of um, not wasting time and not just thinking about things, but putting action behind it. And I think there's a weird little part of me that sees books and stories and poetry and the things that I put out as a way to leave something behind. So yeah. he does
Yeah,
influence me quite a bit.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, that we all benefit from the experiences all of us have, and if you're able to write that into your characters and your stories and your poetry,
Yeah.
good for you. Good for you. Your daughters will have that legacy, huh?
Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
They're a
No
little young to
kidding.
read some of my books yet, but yeah.
What would you classify the genre that you're in? Would you give that share with us
Yeah.
where you're at, and are you going to stick with that?
Good question. Yeah, I write mostly romance. There's a couple that cross genre. I have some paranormal romance, with a ghost and a girl, very the ghost and Mrs.
Wow.
Morris, but you know,
Yeah,
but more
yeah.
modern day. And then my newest series is a traditional romance, Western romance. So that's mostly the genre I stick to. But I have written some things in science fiction and a few things in
Okay.
fantasy. So I'm okay with, I think every genre has a really strong point, has a really strong suit. Fantasy writers are great at building worlds, and science fiction writers are great with a lot of action usually. But then romance writers, I feel their strong suit is character development and really dialogue and um, more interpersonal communication, even if it's not, like in the bedroom, they have to be able to get along. So yeah, I'm mostly a romance writer, but I find that every genre that I try out or work in helps strengthen just my overall writing.
Okay. Do you have a particular theme that you use with when you're writing in science fiction or romance, or you even mentioned Western romance is the most recent one?
Yeah, my most recent series, the Sweet Valley series through Five Prince Publishing, is a Western romance, contemporary. So
Western.
it
Okay.
takes place up in my home state of Wyoming,
Ah,
and it follows three sisters. So there's three books, a book for each sister, and their journey, not just to find love and a healthy relationship, but their journey of growth and how they develop as humans. And I would say my theme for almost every book, actually every book that I've ever written, is a very strong, independent female character. I believe I don't know a woman that's not strong in real life. We're all very strong. We all go through a lot. We all put up with a lot. We all I don't know, are in a constant state of change and growth and self-awareness, a lot of us. So when I write, I want to make sure that it's appealing to the women I know and the women that they kind of want to be, that give them strengths that maybe I don't have yet, in hopes that we can see how it plays out to be able to grow too. So that would be my theme, I think.
oh, that sounds cool. I can almost feel that your writing is helping you develop as a stronger person as you go through the series and your writing and your creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, they can be inspiring characters. Sometimes you write somebody that you don't have the strengths of, and then in your real life, it's fun to think in situations, well, would they put up with this? I don't think they would. So so maybe they teach me things too.
Yeah, and I always pause and think, now is she the kind of person who would really do that?
Yes,
No,
yes.
no, she wouldn't do that at all. She wouldn't do that at all. So I'm like, okay, all right.
It's tough being a
Okay,
writer. Yeah.
yeah. What about your character development? Now you're writing in a couple of different areas, right? So how do you tackle or how do you track your characters in those different areas, the different genres? It could get confusing.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want every female character or every male character I write to be the same character.
Thank
So
you.
yes, I try not to. And it comes down to the work you do as a writer that the reader doesn't often see, which is to start with like a character sheet where you're writing down, their how they grew up. What was their fear when they like as a little kid? What did they want to be? All these little things that humans have that help to shape who they are. So I try to start with a pretty good character story of who that person is. And then, like we talked about earlier, when they go along their journey, sticking true to those very basic belief systems and values and even fears that they might have. And I try to think about as your story progresses, and there's all these obstacles and you have to find a resolution, that the character needs to grow and change in the same way. So I like to give them like a fatal flaw at the beginning, something that's just
Okay.
that's holding them back, that that has maybe caused problems in their life up until that point. And then through interaction with the other characters or situations they're put in, I like to sort of play with how does going through what they're going through change them, and how introspective are they, and why is it different this time that this is causing them to grow from a
Oh,
place where they couldn't before. I love
great.
character development. I think it can be such a
Okay.
beautiful thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could talk all day.
Yeah, good, good, good. And that's fine. But I think your writing and that whole process so creative, but it requires discipline to pump out a book or a
Mhm.
poem, but how do you marry those two things, that discipline with the creativity?
Yeah, that's a great question. Creativity, I think we often think of it as like these little bursts of inspiration, and then we're writing all day and then we don't write for a while, or when we don't have it, we're just down in the dumps and nothing is working. And I think
Okay.
right, the writer's block. Um,
Yes.
I think that creativity is actually true creativity is about persistence, and it's about being able to sit down with a problem, like a plot hole or a scene that's not working or a stanza that's not working, and to play with it and to try new things and to be curious about solutions. I teach a youth writing class, and oftentimes when they're having a problem, I'll have them put their characters in a completely different situation or a different time period, so that their
Okay.
creativity is still running, but they're working through the problem in a different way and outside of the box. So when it comes to my own work and buckling down, I kind of employ some really basic things, like I'll shut my internet off. I'll um I'll set a timer and sit my butt in the chair, and then I'll just write whatever I can, however long I can. Even if I know I won't keep it, or if it's not very good, I'll just keep writing till that timer goes off and then take a break.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
just a matter of not being afraid of failing, or not being afraid
You
of
did.
having to toss out something that's not working. But to devote yourself to the story, and then that's the big goal, is to make sure that you're giving your characters the story they deserve and your readers the story they deserve. And so you just
So,
gotta look through.
okay, all right. So when does all this take place? Just whenever you feel like it, or do you have a writing habit that you try to adhere to?
Yeah, I wish I could say I write every single day. But I work and I got a
Not
family.
really.
So I try to at least do 20, 20 to 30 minutes in the morning, and then at nighttime for sure. And then if I
Mhm.
have the day free, I'll come back to it. Yeah, I like to do about, if I have the whole day, I'll do 3 20-minute sprints and then take a break, walk the dog or get outside, and then do maybe two more of those. Um, and it helps if I have direction and I have, certain scenes that need to be written. But yeah, ideally I'd write 2 to 3 hours a day. Um, if if the world works that way, I would love that. But at least an hour a day probably put in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, are you reading anything that inspires or impacts your writing? What are your reading habits? You said, you lived near a library
Yes,
growing up in Wyoming, and
right. Well, and I used to read almost solely romance novels, and now as I've gotten a little older, I'm exploring different genres. Been reading some of Stephen King's older stuff. Um,
oh,
which
Okay.
sometimes good and sometimes not so good. I've recently picked up The Dog Stars by, I think it's Peter Bellman. I can't remember, but
Peter
it's
Heller,
yeah,
yeah,
Heller. Yes, thank you.
yeah.
Beautiful book.
My favorite book.
Is it? Oh yeah.
It
I used to
really
be a
is.
pilot and just reading it, I don't know, hits me right in the heart. It's very good. Oh, I
And
well,
I'm a pilot too. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, you are. That's cool. I didn't
yeah.
know.
So
Yeah, I
I
have
told I decided if Armageddon hits, I'm going to the nearest airport and I'm going to relive everything that book talks about and try to
right.
make it work that way.
It's really fascinating. And I mean, that's a great skill to have in times like that. So I kind of
Maybe.
like apocalyptic novels. I like to see what happens to society when things break down and how we find our strength. Been reading a lot of Chuck Wendig. I like his books. He's
Okay.
funny and smart, and he's got some interesting. He's a beautiful writer. What else? Jane Austen, I always like to read. I have a few good friends. Bernadette Marie, I read her novels. I've read a couple Allie Hazelwood. They're good, for something
Yeah.
light. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun. Okay. Great. Um, uh, I'm also thinking about all of your writing, various genres. What about editing? How
Oh.
does that feel or work for you?
Well, huh, editing. I used to hate it. I used to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's boring. But really, I've discovered through the books that I've written and just the experience that probably takes me 30% of my time to write a book, and then the rest is editing. And that's my fault because I'm not a plotter. I find I can't work very well with too much confining detail, so I don't outline very strictly. But then as a pantster, I'm just writing scenes and I have to put them all together and it's a mess and it takes me a while. Um, you can write a fairly good book, but if you want a great book, you have to be able to edit. And I do a lot of editing myself now. I've learned a lot from different people that I've worked with. My current editor has taught me so much about all my all my faults, all my little bugaboos, I call them, things that I tend to do over and over. Uh, and I think editing can make the difference between a really great book and a not so good book. And it's part of the writing process. And now I actually kind of like it. It's like taking a big slab of marble, and when you write that book, you chip away and you make a basic shape, but being able to edit well is to put in all those beautiful details and to take out what's not necessary and really
Wow.
end up with that picture, that beautiful,
Uh,
sculpture.
What a great perspective. And I'm thinking back to, you mentioned earlier, writing some stories in college that have disappeared and no one will ever see it.
Yes.
And that's really the difference between understanding the value of editing and blowing it off,
Yeah.
essentially, yeah, forget it. I don't need to edit. Oh,
Right.
really?
Yeah, I know a lot of
Ah,
writers, especially
okay.
beginning writers that are like,
Yeah.
nah, I don't want to do that. It's no fun. And I think it can be an ego hit when you're looking back at your writing because it seems so brilliant in the moment, right? You're just writing, you're like, this is the best book I've ever written. And then you have to go back after the honeymoon is over and really take a look at what you did. And that can, I think being a good writer means giving up some of that idea that what you have is perfect. It needs help, all of it. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah. And yeah, and I have some passages that when I look at it now, I want to take a marker and line through page after page. What possessed me to write that?
And it's never done. You could publish a book and pick it up and be like, oh, I should have cut that out.
Yeah. Yeah, like, oh no, I
How
can't
did,
believe I got away with this.
yes, why didn't somebody stop me?
Yes, exactly.
It's true.
All right, great. Well, I think you know, you've been writing for a number of years, using what you're writing, thinking, planning, growing in it. through all of this, do you have any advice for those of us out here listening and watching that want to get into writing? What's your counsel on that?
Um, we'll do it. That's the basic. Writing is it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Some people it's a hobby, they don't want to make it a career, they just want to write. And I applaud that. I think that's wonderful. I think humans are innately creative and we are looking for ways to express ourselves and to work through things in our head, whether you do that through painting or I don't know, metal work or writing. I think it's important that everybody, when they feel the call to write, should do so. And as you grow in it and you progress and you want to do better, you know, I don't think you need an MFA to be a good writer, but if you want to commit to that, that's a great path. I think you have to weigh the costs and the time, and you can do a lot with, you know, a local writing group, a local critique group. Those are important resources that are usually not very expensive, which is important as a writer. That this community, there's a community almost everywhere I've looked, there's a community of writers, and they're not hard to find. Sometimes they're hard to gather because we're all introverted. But I think that you should be wary of any one school of advice when it comes to your writing. So when you have a community or you have a place where you can take a couple classes or ask questions about process or technique, that's great. But ultimately, your writing journey is yours, and it's not going to look like anybody else's. If you're a mom with 2 little kids, you're not going to write 3,000 words a day, probably. I don't
More
know. You
than
might.
likely. Yeah.
It'd be impressive. In the same way, if you have 2 jobs, you know, your writing might just all have to take place at night. And I think there's a lot of good craft books out there that'll tell you how to get started and give you some advice, but ultimately you need to do what's best for you and what works for you. Some writers I know that are wonderful writers, they don't write every day. They write when it strikes them. And some of them don't write after 5 p.m. and some get up at 2 in the morning to write. And I think it's just a really beautiful way to show the differences and the diversity in all of us and how we can still create, but to be able to do it in a way that works for you. Otherwise, you're going to feel like, well, I didn't get up at 2 and write 2,000 words, so I'm not really a writer. And I don't want any writer to limit themselves that way.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you write, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That self-defeating prophecy, that's yeah, I can't do it. Did you
Yeah.
try? No, I didn't try. Or I tried and I gave up. No, go back, go back. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think you're right, that those local writing groups, CC Writers is the one that I'm holding near and dear to my heart. And that's how I got started was CC Writers, and everything's on Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you live.
Right.
And
And
it's
that's the convenience matters too. Yeah, our writing organization, Writing Heights, same. All the classes are online, so you can take them. They're recorded. Yeah, exactly. And those little groups are wonderful, right? Because you find people that even if they're not in your genre, can be very helpful about reading your work or I don't know. And it makes you feel less alone. I mean, I know we all kind of like to be alone as introverts. We talk to our characters. Um, but then sometimes you feel like, man, am I feeling this and nobody else is? And those writing communities will help you understand that it's normal.
yeah.
Probably everything you're going through is normal.
Yeah, yeah, help you over the hump and
Yes. Yeah.
get
And
going
kind of
again. Or
kick you in the pants a little bit, that's important
okay.
too. Stop
Well, if
feeling
that's
sorry
what
for
it
yourself.
takes, that's what it takes.
That's right.
Well, I'm wondering, with all your experience, what do you see for your writing over the next few years?
Um, well, I just recently made a plan during a retreat because
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
and I don't normally plan, so I was very proud of myself. I've been kind of stagnant. It's just been life has been crazy and a little bit weird and juggling a lot of different roles right now. So I've planned out to finish, I think 7 novels in the next 3 years. I have 3 of them mostly done, and then I've got plans for others. So that's my personal goal, is to get through theirs. There's another series, and then there's a couple standalones. I'm also working with some playwriting, so I'm gonna try to explore more of that and try to write my first screenplay in the next couple of years.
Wow.
So that's, which is a totally different art, and it's hard to wrap my head around, because as a novelist, you're used to these, sweeping paragraphs of description,
Right.
and you can't do that in a play. It has to be all
No.
dialogue. So
Yeah.
so there's
I
that, and
yeah. Wow.
my organization, I'm hoping to build my youth writers, so they're like 12 to 18-year-olds, and it's a free program, and they can Zoom in, they can come to class, and I help them on their writing journey, because I know I didn't have a lot of help when I was growing up. It was small school and whatnot, but to have an outside source that can kind of boost your confidence and help you learn to use your voice in writing. So
Yeah.
I'm going to grow that program for sure.
Great. Very great. Good for you. I applaud that. That's wonderful to hear. I am thinking the same way when it comes to youth. What can we do to support it? So
Yeah.
interesting.
And
Okay.
it's great to work with them. Yeah.
All right. So I tell you what, we have a few minutes. Would you care to share with us? Would you mind doing a bit of reading?
Sure, not at all. I always
All
feel a
right.
little nervous reading out loud, because like we said, with editing, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I
All
should have
right.
checked that. But I'm going to read from Composing Laney, and that's my 3rd book in the last series.
Yeah.
And it just came out last November. So,
Oh,
um,
nice.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, just a little backstory. This is so that last book in the series, and it follows the oldest sister who's a writer, and she's floundering. She's having a hard time, and then she ends up going to an island and meeting an ex-country music star. So,
Wow. Fun. Very fun. Very
so
fun.
yeah,
Okay.
it's one of my favorite books, because it's a lot of banter, and it's a little lighthearted, and yeah, I like that. Okay. So in this scene, they're gonna actually, this is where they meet each other. Oh, there it is. I found my spot. All right. So they're in a bar, just to set it up, and he's dating a younger woman, and she gets mad and she throws her drink in his face. And Laney,
Ooh.
the girl in the book, is at the bar, just having a cocktail, trying to get her writer's block to to undo.
Yes. Okay.
All right. So Laney's brow rose over her glasses as the argument escalated, and the young woman launched into a tirade, including some very unladylike name-calling. She picked up her belongings and splashed the rest of her drink into his chest before storming out. He held up his hands as it dribbled down in the front of his shirt and soaked into his jeans. Well, that's a surprise, Laney snorted, ungoverned by her brain on sabbatical. She quickly put the bottle to her lips. Maybe he hadn't heard, but the scowl on his face said otherwise. Oh, and you know so much about dating, sitting at a bar, all by yourself alone? His tone was mean, and Laney could tell he was pride-stung. Normally, that kind of accusation would have made Laney cringe, gather her things, and leave, but she wasn't normal on the island. She was something else. She didn't know this man beyond his famous persona. What was more, they would never meet again. She was off path, and she wasn't known. She was the girl who used to shine. And now an opportunity to speak her mind stood in front of her, to take back something she had lost. It doesn't take an expert to understand your problem, she said bluntly. Oh, and what's my problem? The smile on Jameson's lips was wolfish and cruel, not at all the easygoing man he often portrayed. Laney rolled her eyes. She's too young for you. He stopped patting his shirt and threw the towel into the sink behind the bar. They're all too young for you, she added. Laney took another swig of her beer and looked back down at her crossword. It felt good to say that to him, as if she was saying it to all the men in the world with that problem. Jameson took another drink, and to Laney's horror, sat down on the stool next to her. I suppose I should be dating women your age, he answered. Women our age, she corrected. But we both know that women our age wouldn't date you. We've already been through that bullshit your type carries. My type? You know, men easily distracted by shiny things. She looked up from the page and then filled the 14th word across for Coleridge Storyteller. Sounds like someone's jaded. And how do you think women get that way, genius? You're just the latest in a long line of good reasons to be. She pushed her glasses to the top of her head and they both stopped talking to stare at each other. Sound like a bitter hag, he chuckled. Well, you're a useless playboy, she countered with a tight smile. And Jameson Clark burst out laughing. Laney sat back, perplexed. When he leaned in closer, and Laney's skin tingled at the warmth of it, she stared back down at the paper and feigned disinterest. I don't know how long we have, but
Very nice, very
yeah.
Nice. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you for listening.
yeah, nice read. We appreciate that. So, our time together for now is coming to a close, and I want to thank you for coming to our kitchen table and sharing with us. Hopefully, your readers going forward will have a better perspective of the writer person behind all of your stories. So, thank you again. And
Yeah,
for
thank
all of
you.
our listeners and watchers out there, thank you for joining us. And another fun conversation at Hello, Ernest at the kitchen table. Thank you again and look forward to seeing you on down the road. Goodbye for now.
Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks for listening to this informal conversation with today's author.
Join us next time as we connect writers and readers around the kitchen table.